video is part of a series of tutorials covering all aspects of guitar, slide guitar, and lap steel, including technique, tone, and much, much more. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Hi everyone, this is an introduction to the slide guitar. In this lesson we'll discuss types of slides, over the fret techniques, right hand technique, left hand technique, and we'll do a lick of the day along with a jam track to go with that lick. Okay, for this lesson we're going to use the tuning of Open D. It's an easy tuning, a pleasant sounding tuning, and my favorite tuning of all the different tunings for slide guitar. So we'll tune up here, starting from the low bottom string. That will be D. Next string will be A. The next string will be D. The next string will be F sharp. The next string will be A. And the high first string will be D. There's all sorts of different types of slide which will each produce different results depending on your taste. I personally like a brass slide, and I play that slide with my pinky. And we'll go into greater detail about this as we move along, but I find that brass gives me a little more sustain, a little more punch, and it's a little more of a bright sound. Now you can also use a glass bottleneck. Glass tends to give a little more compressed sound, not quite as much sustain, although there will be sustain there with it, but not quite as much. And many people like to wear that on their third finger, which we'll get into detail later on. And then the other type of slide is a ceramic slide. A little more compressed again, a little smoother tone, of course a little more mass on a slide this size, but not quite as bright as a brass slide. So these slides are all, whatever your taste may be, should be your choice. If you like brass, or if you like a brighter sound, brass is probably the way to go. If you like a little more mellow sound, then either ceramic or glass would be the way to go. So the key thing to remember about slide is that slide is not approached the same as a regular guitar in the respect of where the slide goes in relation to the fret that you're in. For instance, if you wanted to play at the 12th fret on regular guitar, you would play the note in between the 11th and 12th fret. Now on a slide, you would play over top of the 12th fret to achieve the same note. You'll notice that the slide is just over top of the 12th fret, whereas a fingered note is in between the 11th and 12th fret. And this is pretty key for intonation. Now the cool thing about slide guitar is it's very forgiving. There's a lot of gray notes, a lot of gray areas that you can hit. For instance, if you'd like to create a little tension at the 12th fret on the G string, you could go and slide into the actual note. So this applies to all the frets. The slide to attain the perfect intonation for the note that you're seeking is over top of the fret and not in between the frets. Okay, there's many different ways to approach the slide guitar with your right hand. For this lesson, we're going to discuss the spider technique, And when I say the spider technique, the hand works much like a spider walking. And this is the reason you want to use this is for string blocking, to remove any unwanted sounds while you're playing the slide throughout the different strings that you select. So the technique that I like to use, I will use my thumb on the bottom lowest 3 strings. So the thumb will cover those 3 strings. The first finger will cover the G string. The second finger will cover the B string. And the third finger will cover the top D string. First string, it would be E string, except we're in open tuning, what makes it a D string. Okay? So I block out the strings that I don't want with my hands and only select the strings I want with certain fingers. So for instance, we'll do a lick here. Pretty standard lick at the 12th fret in open D. And watch, my second finger leads it on the second string. First finger comes in to the G string, ends with the thumb. And you'll notice that my other fingers that are not being in use are actually muting the strings along with the bottom part of my thumb. One more. So that's called the spider technique. I believe made popular by Duane Allman, was one of the first slide players to use that technique, or at least that's the one that I'm aware of. There's nothing wrong with not using spider. Some of the older blues gentlemen, they like to just hit the guitar like a just using their thumb or their fingers. There's nothing wrong with that if that's your style. I tend to go more for a different execution on my note choice, and I like to have a little less noise in my playing when I can. So that's the spider technique. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't come easy. It's not an easy thing to learn. It's a lot of motor skills, but once you get it, a whole new world will open up for you. Okay, so the other technique that I like to use is muting the strings behind the slide with my left hand. The reason that we do this, or that I do this, is to remove any unwanted string noise or overtones from the particular sound that you're seeking. For instance, when you don't mute behind the slide, there are overtones. Now you'll see that my fingers are doing nothing behind the slide, they're just in the open. So in that, I get a few unwanted overtones that I like to remove. So there's a number of ways you can do this, and it really comes down to what you're most comfortable with. Many people, if they play with their pinky, like to use their third finger just behind the slide. So they'll mute, and it'll sound like this. Right, just like a standard muted string sound. Then they'll play the slide in front of that, so then you don't get any unwanted noise. Now the advantage to using your third finger is it allows your other two fingers that you're not using to do some behind the slide fretting, which we will get into in a further lesson, as this is a little more complicated. So we'll deal with this as we move on further down the road. I tend to like to use my first finger behind the slide, which achieves the same desired result in the fact that we have no unwanted string noise. And you'll see that this finger is just behind the slide, removing all the unwanted noise that you would have without muting behind the slide. That's left hand behind the slide muting. Either way you approach this is not wrong. It just comes down to what you are most comfortable with your learning curve. Also, you can wear the slide on the third finger and still do the same thing. And with a bottleneck on the third finger. One important thing about the slide guitar is achieving the vibrato. The vibrato, in my opinion, is what gives the guitar player his signature. For instance, if you remember old B.B. King videos or B.B. King songs, he would have a vibrato with his hand that would immediately define who he was, and it was very heavy-handed vibratos. Very heavy-handed vibrato and very unique, and that's what made his signature his own. Now with the slide, the same principle applies. The vibrato will really define your tone, define your signature, and help you stand out from the other players. I tend to go for a Ry Cooder or a David Lindley style slide, which is a slower, steady, kind of a melted butter slide tone, I like to call it. And I'll give you an example. Just a very steady, lengthy vibrato. Now, it's not an easy thing to achieve. I still struggle with this to this day. I tend to always have a vibrato that's faster than I like it to be. I think that's just nature, at least for myself. I just immediately tend to play faster, so I struggle to play as slow as I can. And I've been doing that for 35 years, and I'm still not quite where I want to be. There's nothing wrong with playing a fast vibrato. Some people sound great like that, and that's the style they choose. Still a cool vibrato, it's just not my thing. But the one thing about the vibrato, when you use your third finger behind the slide to mute, I believe that gives a little more strength in your wrist for that vibrato. Now I still use my first finger. So it's really your choice, whatever's going to give you the strongest vibrato to your liking. But it is important because it is that thing that will help you stand out from the other guitar players. In this lesson, we're going to practice one lick here, a very simple lick as a starter lick. And once we have this lick figured out, I'm going to play it along with a jam track, and you can feel free to play along with me. So the lick is basically going to be, begins at the 12th fret, and I'll play it for you. Okay, so we start at the 12th fret, We're going to use the first two fingers here to pluck the top notes as we pluck the bottom string with our thumb. Okay. Then we'll take our second finger using the spider technique. First finger. Second finger, 12th fret, second string. First finger back up 12th on the third string. End it with the thumb plucking the 4th string. Okay, should be like this. Okay, so a simple lick to get started with. We'll play this with the jam track now. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I hope I've helped you to learn something here about the slide guitar. As we move along with this series, we'll get into greater depth of slide guitar, including lap steel. If you like what you saw here, please subscribe, and we'll see you soon.